Well, thank you everybody for joining us today. My name is Steve Ride. My title is Manager of Sport Development and Championships for Golf Saskatchewan. So I've been there for, this will be my 5th season. We're very proud to present an online webinar today with Claire Richardson, Keri Moffat, and Anna Young. We'll do some introductions here shortly, but before we do that, I'd like to do a quick land acknowledgement. I'd like to start by humbly recognizing that our organization's work is province-wide and therefore reaches lands covered by all treaties, the traditional lands of the Cree, Dakota, Dene, Lakota, Nakota, Saulteaux peoples, as well as the homeland of the Métis. So tonight's agenda, basic introductions, discussion on the college recruitment process, some Q&A. So maybe everybody, if you could just mute your mic, you can type your questions in the chat option on the bottom there. As well, this is being recorded. You can view this webinar as well as other webinars on our Golf Saskatchewan YouTube page. So first of all, I'd like to introduce Claire Richardson. Claire, please go ahead and if you'd like, share your screen.
All right, let's see if I can figure out how to do this.
I did create you co-host. I'm going to unshare mine.
Oh boy.
So on the bottom right, should say share screen. There we go.
Jump back to the beginning. Let me see. I need to present this now. All right. Does that look right to everybody? You're not looking at my notes or anything? All right.
Can you minimize the one screen so we can see the, there we go.
Okay. Let me see how I can do this. I'm going to need to see my notes here for a second. Are you looking at my notes now?
There's a screen with some notes on there, yeah.
Okay. Sorry about that.
If you press, you go to the bottom.
Yeah.
And then there should be like 3 dots that come up.
Oh boy, sorry everybody.
Oh yeah, we're the one on the bottom left. There was like a, oh, you don't have the same 3 dots.
All right, sorry, let me stop this for a second. It worked a minute ago. Apologies, everybody.
It's okay. We can edit in and out.
That's the one frustrating thing. The presenter view doesn't allow you to look at your notes.
Well, I thought I had this queued up. Now you're going the wrong direction.
There you go, those 3 dots.
This one?
Open speaker notes. And it should just show on your screen. And
okay, cool. All right, you're good. You can't see my notes anymore?
No, you're good.
All right, cool. Thanks for helping me through that, everybody. Yeah, great intro. So, so my name is Claire Richardson, and yeah, let's see. So I advise junior golfers through the recruiting process. I coached at Harvard. You wouldn't believe it, but I actually went there as well. And that's kind of my golfing background from the collegiate perspective. I'm originally from the Boston area. So I grew up in what I thought was cold weather until I looked up your local weather. And then I thought, no, this is tropical. But yeah, tonight I'm going to focus on what I think are a few of the most important aspects of the recruiting process. And, you know, I'm going to kind of try to focus on some broad recruiting advice with a handful of specifics, but hopefully we'll have time for some questions at the end if I pass over anything. So yeah, there are 4 main areas that I want to talk about. And the first is just, why do you want to play college golf? I think that when we start talking about the recruiting process, it's really important to start by thinking about, like, why am I trying to do this thing? You can't successfully navigate the recruiting process if you don't know what you're trying to achieve. So I'll talk a little bit about, like, how to discover what you want and how to set yourself up for a successful recruiting process and hopefully a really meaningful college golf experience. Next, I'll share just some high-level advice for how to approach the recruiting process and your interactions with coaches. Then I'll share some basics on the timeline. And I'll finish by just talking about like how you actually get started communicating with coaches and exploring the options that you have. So yeah, why play college golf? Like I said, if you're going to get recruited, you need to start thinking about why you want to get recruited. And it's kind of the same thing as asking like, why do you want to play golf in college? And so, you know, here are some of the reasons that might come to mind. In my opinion, some of these are definitely better than others. And I think a lot of coaches would agree. Like the two at the bottom here, they're realities of the recruiting process, but they really aren't great motivators. And if you focus on this kind of thing, like it's kind of the same as if you get focused on tournament results when you're trying to get recruited, and you kind of miss out on the bigger picture of what you're hoping to get out of this experience. And I think that's something that Keri's maybe going to talk a little bit more about. And so, along these lines, playing college golf, it's a significant time commitment, and coaches, they want players who are going to go above and beyond to help the team. They want players who are intrinsically motivated. And so, I encourage you to think about what it is for you. What's the biggest motivator? And then to share some of that with coaches as you go through the process, right? I think coaches, the more you can be honest about what you're looking for, the more you can find the right fit. And so I really encourage you before you get started to think about like, what is it for me that I'm really looking for? And, these are the golf aspects, and there's certainly going to be academic aspects and personal elements that you want in your experience. And if you know that ahead of time, you're much more likely to be able to find it or know it when you see it. Okay, so now I want to share some high-level advice for how you approach the recruiting process. Like, what do you actually need to do to get recruited? And this is much more on the philosophical side to start. So here are the 4 most important pieces of advice that I have for junior golfers. For 99% of junior golfers going through the recruiting process, that means being proactive. Most kids don't have coaches chasing after them. And so that means that you shouldn't wait for a coach to find you. That generally doesn't happen, at least not at schools that like you're most likely to be interested in. And so I think this means reaching out to coaches yourself, not waiting for them to find you. And, recruiting databases, they can be helpful at elements of the recruiting process. But I generally think that you achieve better results when you put yourself out there and you go after the schools that you're most interested in. So I think initiating contact with coaches yourself and really advocating for yourself are the most helpful way. And I'll talk more about how to do this in a minute. And then if you're going to contact college coaches, you need to know which ones, right? So that's one area where I see a lot of students run into trouble, is that they have a lot of schools that they want to contact that really aren't realistic for them. And, talking about how to make this process successful and how to get what you want, you need to make sure that you're targeting the right set of schools. So that's not to say that you shouldn't reach out to the dream schools that you have, but it just means that you also need to be really mindful about like, okay, what's going to be a good fit today? Or what's my best chance of getting a scholarship? And so, along the lines of scholarships, this is one piece of data that I did want to hone in on, which is that you can see in men's golf, a fully funded team, and not all teams are fully funded, but a fully funded Division I team can offer the equivalent of 4.5 scholarships worth of money across the entire team. And it goes down for Division II, and then it's not an option for Division III. And so if you do that math, that's on average a half scholarship per player. On the women's side, it's a little bit more generous, but a fully funded Division I program can offer 6 full scholarships, or the equivalent of 6 scholarships worth of funding across their 8 players, or however many players they have on a team. And so, it just sets, I think, the expectation of what's realistic. And if a scholarship is one of the things that you're looking for, Again, maybe that means that you're looking at a broader set of schools, or a set of schools where you're an even better candidate, right? You're likely to make a bigger impact on the team and therefore be more likely to get a substantial scholarship. So I think those are important things to kind of keep in mind as you're going through it. You know, how can I be realistic about what I want to achieve? Okay, so next, you know, when it comes to communicating with coaches, you need to know what to say to them, right? Like, how do I actually convey to a coach that I'm interested in their school? And how do I allow them to assess me to figure out if I have the ability to help their team? And I think that the way that you do this and sharing the information that's going to allow coaches to clearly learn about you and make a great first impression is really important. So I think, you know, communicating well, putting the time into communicating well is also a very important piece of this process. And the last thing is that, you know, you should do the talking. At the end of the day, coaches, they don't want to hear from, you know, mom or dad or somebody like me. They want to hear from the person who's going to be on their team. And that's for, you know, a variety of reasons. Keri can talk about that probably in more detail, which is that the person who's comfortable communicating with coaches is oftentimes the person that is going to be more successful on a college campus, right? Is going to be able to get to know the coach that they would have to start to build a relationship before they get there. And that's something that, you know, if you're using a big recruiting platform or if somebody else is reaching out on your behalf, they're taking away that opportunity. And so I think it's really important that, you know, as a kid, you have the support of the people around you, but that you're the one who's kind of leading things yourself. Okay, so now let's get into some of the details of the recruiting process. Like, when should you be doing all of these things? And, you know, the ideal time, I think, to initiate contact with college coaches, to be on the safe side, is at the end of 10th grade. And the reason why is because Division 1 and 2 coaches, they can't really start meaningfully interacting with you until after June 15th following 10th grade. Division 3 coaches can technically communicate with you at any point, but most, you know, they're not really recruiting on a crazy aggressive timeline. So that's typically a bit later anyway. Keri, definitely curious to hear your experience on this. And I think every coach tends to have a slightly different timeline, but I think if you're reaching out at the end of 10th grade, you have tons of time to, you know, start to build those relationships with coaches and explore your options. Then throughout 11th grade, I think you want to be sending periodic updates, and some of the information that you might want to share via email, things like tournament scores, your grades, and standardized test results. You know, like I mentioned, your goals, tournament plans, and, you know, training throughout the winter, things like that are things that coaches are interested in. Same with videos of you, you know, maybe taking a few swings inside, maybe playing a few holes. All of these things help coaches learn more about you and assess what you bring to the table. And along the same lines, you're going to have the opportunity to get information back from coaches and learn more about their programs as well. You can also interact with coaches, you know, over the phone and phone calls, in-person meetings. You can take visits to schools. I think those are great ways to learn about college golf and to start to figure out whether an environment is right for you. So all of that typically happens throughout, you know, in an ideal world, throughout junior year. You know, coaches, like I said, they're looking at all of these pieces. They're looking at grades and test scores and tournament results, and like the personal qualities, I think, are huge. Like I said, finding the right fit is becoming increasingly important these days, when I think golf is more competitive and you want to find the environment that's right for you, and coaches want to find the person who's right for their team. Okay, so when does this process then wrap up? It varies significantly. I think top Division 1 programs, you know, the Stanfords of the world, like they might be making offers in August before 11th grade, right? So it's a very quick, like 2-month recruiting process, basically. But that's not the norm. I'd say most coaches, they're recruiting throughout 11th grade and making offers at some point towards the end of 11th grade or in the summer before senior year. That said, some people will recruit well into 12th grade, and I can't stress this enough. Even if you're not on that timeline, it's almost never too late. the later you wait, the less opportunity you have to explore your options, but the door is almost never closed. I think you have to communicate kind of a bit more rapidly, and you get down to the nitty-gritty a lot faster. But I've started working with people in like August before senior year, and they still, get recruited. They still have great opportunities. And honestly, I had a coach email me yesterday asking if I had anybody who was still looking to start next fall. So it definitely happens. There are opportunities out there. You may not have your first pick, but you can almost always find something. And even if you're a senior right now, like there's always the opportunity of a gap year. Okay, so that's all background and context and kind of a lot of philosophical advice. And now I want to talk about how you actually get started, right? Like if you're in the recruiting process, how do you actually reach out to a coach? What should you be doing? And I think you need 3 things. I've touched on a lot of it. You need a list of schools that are reasonable for you to consider. You need to have an introductory email to send to coaches to kind of share your info. And you need a resume that's going to dive a little bit deeper to share kind of your tournament results and help coaches get a sense of your level of play. This is a busy slide, but I want to talk you through this briefly. Let me break it down. I think that I like to think about this as a graph of like me as a person, and I have a golf level and an academic level, and that every school in the country is going to fall somewhere on this graph for me. And the schools where I'm a very strong golf candidate are going to be on the left side of this x-axis, and the schools that are more of a reach are over here on the right. The same for academics. The schools that are kind of towards the bottom are schools where I'm a very strong fit and likely to get in, and schools that are at the top are schools that are more of a reach for me. And one of the biggest mistakes that I see kids make is that their school list is filled with dream schools. And so I really encourage you when you're thinking like, how can I have more schools in this target zone? And how can I communicate well with coaches so that even the schools that are a bit more of a reach, those coaches are interested because they see my potential. They see the goals that I have and the work that I'm putting in, and they want to work with me to help me achieve those goals. And then I'll say, if your number one goal is to get a scholarship, the school where you're a very strong fit and you're strong academically are schools where you're very likely to see a better scholarship package. So I want to share a couple of resources now. If that's where schools fall, like how do you know what school is where? How do you assess your fit? These are some resources that I think can be really helpful for kids as you're going through the recruiting process, trying to learn about schools. The first is the American Guide to College Golf. There's a subscription associated with that, but I think it's definitely worth it in my opinion. You can kind of click through and see a lot of tournament results of every college in the country. Junior Golf Scoreboard shares a list of signees for the last 4 years. So you can see where every kid in the country who's ranked on Junior Golf Scoreboard has gone to school, and you can see what their junior golf ranking was when they committed. So you can kind of compare your own junior golf ranking to that. You can poke around on team websites. I think that's a great way to learn about different programs in general, and you can view their team results to get a sense of, again, where you would slot in. And then I recently kind of built a tool that tries to combine all of this info, and it's basically a searchable spreadsheet like this. So you can enter in your test scores and your tournament scoring average, and this graph populates. And so you can kind of get a visual sense of what schools are reasonable for you to consider. You also get a chart that goes with it that shares a bit more information on each school, and again combines like that Junior Golf Scoreboard ranking and data as well as tournament scoring averages. So you can see, as a junior golfer, how do I compare to players on a given team? And the point that I want to kind of call out here is that how you play as a junior, Keri will talk about this, I'm sure, a lot more, doesn't always predict how you play as a junior golfer, right? So one of the mistakes that I see people make sometimes is they say, oh, well, if I have a 76 scoring average, surely I can play on a team where the 5th player is shooting 78, right? I'm better than that player. I'm good enough to play on that team. And that may be true, But there are certain schools where players are more likely to keep getting better in college, or more likely to see their skills kind of atrophy a little bit as life and academics get in the way. And I think it's important to talk with coaches about what they like to see in their potential recruits, and to kind of, look at both sides, right? Look at the junior golf ranking piece and at the college score piece and see, maybe this is a team where they're recruiting players who average, scores around par. And when they get to that school, they don't play well. And just thinking that you can, show up and be an impact player, like maybe, but maybe there's more to it. And I think that's an important piece to look at. Okay, so that's how you find schools. Those are a few resources for finding schools that you should target. What does an intro email look like? Let me pull up a sample intro email. The first thing, like I said, is you should be sending an introductory email to each coach on your list. I think email is the best way to get in touch instead of like a database personally. I think it's more personal and you can personalize it for each school. You want to share your background, kind of, when you started playing golf. If there's anything interesting there, I think it's great to kind of have that personal touch with coaches. I recommend sharing a few highlights and goals. And the purpose of that is to entice a coach to open up your resume, which I'll talk about next. Academics are obviously an important part of this process. It's important to include that when you're communicating with coaches. And then you want to talk about kind of any of the next steps, right? Like, I'm going to send you a swing video in the future, or I have this tournament coming up. And then you want to finish by thanking a coach. So I won't read through this. You can see it in the future, but I think that you want to take the time to write a well-polished, professional-looking introductory email, and you want to take the time to personalize it for every school. Next up is the resume. I think that the intro email does a good job of introducing yourself, but it really only includes like a couple of your accolades, and the resume is a better way to show more of that. So here is a sample resume that you might include and send to a coach. And it should be kind of the single place where coaches can find more information about you. So obviously it's got academics on there, maybe a few notes about your athletic background or your academic accomplishments. And then you'll see that it includes predominantly just tournament results. I always recommend that you include all of your tournament results from the last year. People always wonder, like, should I take some out? What about the bad ones? What's a coach going to think if they see that one on there? In my experience, it's much more important to be honest and to kind of have that level of transparency of like, yeah, I didn't have a great day on that one, and to be able to talk about that than it is to kind of try to present this like perfect image. Because coaches know too, right? Like if they look you up online, they'll probably be able to find those results anyway. And so better to just lead with that. But the other big thing that I want to point out here is like, coaches, especially in 10th grade, 11th grade, they're looking for your potential, right? Like they're not out here saying, well, oh man, this person, they've got a couple scores in the 80s. There's an 89 on there. Like, nope, that's not going to work. They're much more interested in where your game is going. And your low numbers are the better indication of where your game is going than a couple of the high ones. And so, I think the more you can focus on that, just, trying to get better, learn from the bad stuff, right? We're not always going to like how it goes, but we can learn from it. But the more you can focus on what you're going to do to keep getting better, that's what's going to make a coach want to put you on their radar. And so, yeah, I recommend including it all and being able to talk about it all. So those are kind of the three basics that you need to reach out to a coach initially: the school list, the intro email, and the resume. And then, moving forward over the course of the recruiting process, I recommend sending update emails every month or two, but I also recommend asking coaches because, like I said, every coach kind of has slightly a different way of doing things, and you want to defer to each of them. And, kind of the second point is the big one, like ask for feedback. I think a lot of kids, they're afraid to ask a coach, where am I on your list? And you can get some feedback that you don't like when you say that, right? But it's also really helpful. And so I think that's, again, another mistake that a lot of kids make, is just kind of sharing information and not asking for where it puts them in this process. And the more you can do that, I think the more you're gonna be able to move through and like really be able to know what your best options are. So I'll leave it at that. I know that's a lot of high level advice, but I hope that's also kind of what you need to get started. And at this point, I'll pass it off to Keri, and hopefully she can fill in some of the gaps that I left. And hopefully we'll have time for questions at the end.
All right, now I'm gonna share my screen. One second. All right. And can you guys see my notes? Are you guys good? You good? Okay. All right. Okay, so thanks, Claire. That was really good. That was helpful. I even learned a few things in that one. Thanks, Steve, for having me on this call. My name is Keri Moffat, and I am a golf professional here in Vancouver. I started coaching the UBC women's golf team about, I'm trying to think, it's probably 11 or 12 years ago. I'm the assistant. And I started just as a technical coach, and it evolved into being part of all aspects of it. The head coach does a little bit more of the recruiting, kind of like what Claire was talking about, but I do a lot of the practices, and I primarily travel with the team. So what I wanted to talk a little bit about today is what juniors can do now in their time, especially in the, in their grade 8, grade 9, 10, to work on some of the aspects that make it a little easier for them to transition in their first year. I see a lot of kids get into their first year at university and just have a little bit of struggle in that first year as a rookie, managing a lot of what's going on. And what are we looking for in a recruit? So I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. Okay. So be a good person. I know it sounds pretty simple, but one of the things I think the kids, juniors, will maybe not really take in until they're in it is the fact that you pretty much go your whole junior career as an individual player, and then you end up on a team of 6, 7, 8, 10 girls. So I think one of the things that it's important to really understand that being a good person to your coaches, to your teammates, to the other schools that we will be meeting on the road, it's just a really important thing because it's the lasting impression that you leave on people. I know with our team, we have some core values that we do every tournament that we're at in the States. It's always our mandate. We go in, we find the head pro at the end of the tournament. We find, shake his or her hand and just thank them for hosting. Any volunteer that we ever see on the road, we're always just talking to them to make sure that, they know how appreciative we are that they're there. So it's really important for us to have good manners. Of course, we're Canadian. we want to be known as the people who are just really good people to the ones that are putting on the tournaments. So that strength of character and how that creates the chemistry on the team is really important, because I think that's one of the biggest growths that for any kind of rookie is adjusting to the team dynamic. Emotional control. This is a really important one for kids to start thinking about now. And I honestly think that for a junior golfer, it's never too early to start working on some of the just the other aspects that are not just technical, because technical is certainly a big part of what's going to get you a scholarship, but there's so many good juniors out there technically. So that's going to get you so far. And when a coach is watching you, what they're looking to see how you'll fit in with the team dynamic. And they're seeing how that you handle yourself when things are going well. But I think usually a college coach's favorite thing is to see what happens when a kid is not playing well. And that's a telling characteristic of somebody's personality is, can you weather the storm when it's not going well? So kind of what Claire was talking a bit about, what I liked when you said, don't lie about the scores. I think for a coach looking at the scores, your resume, if you went, 72, 82, and then the next day or the next tournament, you went back down to shooting in the 70s, so that kind of shows your grit. So I think that's a really important part. The other thing I think is a new concept for kids who are getting on a team. We, at UBC, we play in the NAI, so we're down in the States, and we're in a situation where 5 play, 4 count. And a bad attitude infiltrates the team. So if you're playing bad and you've got your other 4 teammates out there and they can see your body language, that puts pressure on them. So if you can find a way to manage those emotions out there, then you're not putting that extra pressure on your other teammates because they can see you, that you're upset. And that really goes a long way to creating a really good dynamic on the road. Okay. Be a good student. These are things that you can work on right now. UBC is a tough school, and some of the schools that you'll be looking at, it's really important to understand that, Claire, I don't know exactly what the percentage is, but what is it? Less than 1% will actually make it playing professionally. So you're there for a degree, and having the experience of a lifetime. So as a student athlete, you have to get used to missing a lot of school. So it's important right now to learn to come up with some good study habits, good time management, because that is, you're studying on planes, you're studying in vans, you're studying in airports, and you've got to get really good at being a little out of control of the environment in which you'll be studying and being okay with that. Also in first year, it's really important to reach out at the school that you're at. There's tutoring programs, being really good at communicating with your professors about when you're going to be away. And also, I know our girls, we have 5 rookies this year. And one of the things that they've done is they've started their own study group. So actually all 8 of them will study, I think, usually once or twice a week together. So just reaching out to your teammates, I think, is a really important part so that you can keep your average up. I know my girls right now they're highly competitive off and off the course, but they're sitting at, I think they said they're at a 76 or 78 average right now. And there's 3 that are at an 80% average in school, and they're seeing how many they can get to the All-Canadian, which is an 80% or above. So it's kind of cool to see them pushing themselves in the academics, because truly that is a big part of why you're there as well. Adversity and resiliency. How do you persevere during the challenges that will be presented in school, on the road, with your team? How do you respond to these new things that are going to be thrown at you constantly, especially in that first year? Things go smooth and then they don't. You miss flights, your bags don't show up. There's things that will happen that you have to find ways to bounce back after a bad round. How do you interact with your teammates when your score is the one dropped for the day? Are you causing the drama and the tears where you have 4 players who are pretty happy with how they're playing? How do you support them when you haven't had a great day? I think this is something that's really important for juniors to start thinking about now, because that self-reliance and independence and being able to, I guess, self-soothe is a very big skill. And being able to adjust on the fly, you know, you manage your ball flight, and maybe it's not going well that day, but just having that resiliency to adjust mid-round and figure it out and get it done. Good fundamentals. I mean, this is an obvious one. There's lots of different golf swings out there. There's different characteristics and traits that are important, like distance and dispersion rates, but can you hit the ball where you're looking? And are you good at adjusting on the day when maybe your dispersion rates are not that great? And maybe you need to play a little bit more conservative that, you know, for a few holes until you get feeling a little bit better in your swing. It's good to have those great fundamentals, those core fundamentals to your golf swing, because then that allows your college coaches to be able to go in there and just teach you new shots to add more tools to the toolbox. So if you're already coming in with a pretty good basic golf swing, we can help you to learn how to hit different shots, especially when, you know, you're traveling all across different countries or different states. You're going to be required to hit different shots based on where you are. So it's just an important part. And I think one of the most important, it may be more of a goal, is something you'll learn in the 4 years, that trying to find some core values to your golf swing where you can find ways to not have your score fluctuate so much. You know, trying to find that consistency. I know with our team, we always talk about a certain score being just the currency for what we were looking for. And as soon as we said and put that goal out, the girls just tended to find ways to stay closer to that line. And we saw less kind of fluctuation. So I think that's a really important part. Growth mindset. Are you coachable? We've had some players that are not. They are very with their golf swings or with their mind, and it was very tough, and they didn't fit into the dynamic. So, you know, with a fixed set of beliefs, an athlete is motivated to prove oneself and receive praise. Whereas if you're a growth mindset, you're motivated to work hard, develop, and persist. And with our team, it's one of the things that I mean, with my coaching on a daily basis, and when I'm with the girls, this is one of the most important things that I coach. I really truly believe opening up your mind to being okay with being wrong or different ways of seeing things, especially when you're on a team with, you know, different diversity on your team, different ethnicity. You know, we have to be open to other people and other ways, because that is truly the way you get better in life. Ability to fight, grit. Do you have it? Can you find it? Can you build it now? It's important in team golf to never, ever, ever give up, because I'm telling you, it has come down to one stroke so many times. And I know it seems really strange because you're not used to playing, you know, you're just based on your own score. But when you're 4 or 5 count 4, we played Canadians in Ontario. I can't remember which course we were. I can't remember. But we were in a battle, dogfight with University of Victoria. And we played 4 days. And it came down to the last hole, and we had to birdie. And it was one stroke after 4 days. So that's where you just have to find the absolute grit to fight, because even if you're fighting for an 80, it might be all that the team needed to win. And that's it to me, that's the true character of a champion. the need for speed. We are in a era in golf where speed is king and queen, and that's it, you know, whether we like it or not, this is where we're going. I know at UBC we're a pretty long team. You know, in the Pacific Northwest, we fight for distance up here, and then we get down into the desert and we tend to hit it quite far. We do compete in the NAI, but we occasionally will play D1 and D2 events. So we are trying to compete in terms of distance, because, you know, if you can hit it farther down the fairway and get closer to the green, you just can hit it closer. I mean, that's just stats. So we want to learn how to create the speed in the gym and on the range, but in a safe way, and learning how to move properly with ground force and building those fundamentals. It's going to go a long way to keeping your body healthy for 4 years in college golf. I know for our team, we always have team goals around injuries, and we'd like to be injury free every year, and we're not. And the harder we're working our bodies and the more we're doing to our bodies to create the speed with this stack system and the speed sticks and everything we're doing in the gym, lifting heavy, we have to be really careful that we're doing it in the right way. So I would recommend juniors finding somebody who knows how to do that properly and start to build some of those fundamentals now. And again, earlier is better, because a lot of the rookies will come onto our team, and in that first semester, they're so sore. They're not used to actually working out. And so, you know, keeping up with school and travel and practice and everything they're doing now to work out, you know, it's usually in the first week, it's the 1 or 2 of them that can't even walk a flight of stairs, are so sore. So I would definitely, it's one of my biggest recommendations for a junior, start now, because I'm telling you, it's not going to be easy in those first few weeks. This is, I think, my last one here. This is, anybody out there's watched Ted Lasso, best show that's been made ever, really. You know, I'm not sure, it's not his quote, but be curious, not judgmental. This is a mindset for me that I've lived most of my life, and I think it's really important to apply that for any junior out there, because I think it's really cool if a kid cannot lose that sense of wonderment and create that imagination around the golf course, because, you know, you want to be able to see shots that aren't your normal shots, because that's a really big thing when you start to travel and play different golf courses and get yourself into some interesting situations. If you can stay creative and you can keep that imagination building, it will definitely help you when you get yourself into trouble. And, you know, I remember we won NAIA, we won nationals just before COVID. We haven't been able to defend because we haven't been able to get back down there. But we won nationals right before. And it was, the girls were so nervous in that final round, because I think might have had a 1 or 2 stroke lead, but it was a battleground between 3 schools. And these girls, the shots that they had to hit in the first 5 or 6 holes because they were so nervous was incredible. And I, as a coach, one of the hardest things I think is to step back and really trust a player when they see that creativity and they just look at you, you go, I've got this, coach. And I was so impressed with their ability to hit these shots in that final round. And so I think it's really, it's a good skill to start doing now. And don't lose that, because that is a big part. I know it's a big part of why we won that national championship. And it's really important to be curious and ask those questions, like get outside of your comfort zone and get outside of that box that you're in and push yourself to grow, because that, you know, you're good, you're already good. But as a college coach, and what I try to do is I try to take where you're at and make you better. And I think that's just a big part of your 4 years playing. That's me. There you go. I'll leave it with you, Steve.
Awesome. Great job, Keri. Claire, thank you so much. Anna, would you like to add a few little tidbits in there?
For sure. First of all, thanks again for having me on this call. I was so excited because when I was a junior, I would have loved something like this. And I've learned a few things from both Claire and Keri. So that's been super awesome. And a lot of things I agree with. And I'm just really excited to talk about some of my experiences. So kind of building off of what both of them have said, I'm going to touch on a little bit of everything. The first question that I think is important in looking for a school to go to is, do you want to be an athlete or do you want to go for experience? And that kind of starts out the main questions that you're going to ask yourself, because if you want to be an athlete, you still have to be good at your academics and they're still a priority, but you might be asking different questions if golf is going to be more of a priority, if it's going to be 50-50, or if academics is going to be more important to you. You know, that's going to be your first main question to decide, okay, what schools do I look at? So if you are going for an experience, I think it's really important to make sure that it's really important to make sure that you enjoy where you go to school. So the location, if it's convenient to go home. Another thing to look at is the expenses, as if it's going to cost a lot for you to travel there, or if, you know, even just looking at the flights. For me, flying from Saskatoon to Gainesville was like an entire day of travel. And if there was any delays, I would have to stay over in Minneapolis for a night. And that happened more often than I'd like to admit, but it is something to consider. Another thing is culture and religion. So I have friends who are not very religious or who were religious, and they went very Christian or very public, and they may have preferred something that was a little bit different. So if people are looking at schools that are in like the southern states, I would recommend looking at if it is a religious type school, because that does change your experience a little bit. And it might even change some of the, would maybe like one or two, but something to consider. And then another thing is weather. You know, do you want to have seasons? Do you want to have golf every single day? You know, if you grow up in Saskatchewan or even other parts of Canada where you're used to having a winter and you're used to having an off season, it might be really difficult to go to playing golf all year round, which means your off season during your Christmas time is going to be so important, because you're not used to playing golf for 11 months. Now that was a big change for me. And the cool thing is, when you're going to be an athlete and a student, you still get a lot of that balance, but you still have to be aware of how that change is on your mind, because it can get overwhelming if you're not used to it. And then one thing to consider, which I'm sure this is one of the basics and Keri didn't touch on only because it's so important, is that make sure that the school you're going to has a degree that you're interested in. If you're going to a school just because you want to golf there, that's awesome, but make sure that there's at least one degree that you're interested in, because just like both of them said, academics are important. And one thing I had to consider as well is, even though I wanted to turn professional, it is a big importance to understand that injury is a real thing. Your sport could stop at any time, whether you're in college, whether you turn professional, whether you continue playing golf for the rest of your life and you get injured there too. It's important to consider. So as an athlete, you should always look at what player you want to be on the team. Now, when I say that, I actually looked at a lot of schools for that reason. Like, I looked at the players' scores specifically because I wanted to be number 3 or 4 on the squad. Now, I chose this because for me, I was very realistic about how I was going to get better and what environment was going to push me in a healthy way. Now, everybody's personalities are different and there's no wrong or right, but it is good to know and think about if you are going to be number 1 on the team and if you're going to excel that way, and if that's how you get better or you want to push yourself, that's important to understand. And if you want to be number 5 number 4, or even number 8 on the team. You know, there's different responsibilities to being a certain number on your team. It's not a be all end all at all, but it is something to consider. Hello,
Looks like
am
the
I back?
Humboldt Wi-Fi is a
Okay.
little.
I know.
There
Normally it's pretty good. Okay. Between 2 schools and have your number 1 school and your number 2 school or whatever they are. Oh no, did I freeze again? Okay. Did I freeze?
Sorry, yeah, you did freeze there. Kind of heard number 1, number 2 school. It's okay.
Okay. That's okay. I saw everybody's face freeze. All right. So one thing to consider is facilities and transportation. So when I went to the University of Tulsa for 1 year before I transferred to the University of Florida, our golf courses that we had access to were at least 20 minutes away. And the closest one was a par 3 course with a very small range. And then the best course, our main course that we played at, was about 35 minutes away. So my teammates who didn't have a car were not able to practice unless someone could give them a ride, or they couldn't make it to practice unless someone was able to also give them a ride. So having a car or having some type of transportation, if the as close, is something to consider as well. When I went to it was very, oh no, okay. What was the last thing you heard? Hello?
There we go. Kind
Okay.
of froze a little bit there.
My Wi-Fi has never had this problem. I'm so sorry.
That was great. You're like, I'm so sorry.
Oh my gosh, no. Oh man. Okay. It seems like we're back for now. Okay. So when I went to the University of Florida, our golf course was a lot closer. It was actually on campus, and I lived probably about 5 minutes from campus. I would drive my car to the golf course, and then I would take my bike to my classes. So that was super convenient. Not every course or college is going to have that, but it is something to consider if transportation is an issue. Yes. And then one of the other things I'd like to touch on is something that both Keri and Claire discussed is chemistry. So everybody's different, and every coach is different. Every player is different. It's all about finding the best puzzle piece for your coaching style. So there's going to be a lot of great coaches out there, and some of them are going to work for you and some of them aren't. So when I was going through the process, I was lucky enough that when I went on my unofficial visits and my official visits, I was able to talk with the players on the team, and I got to golf with them. So I could really get to know their team chemistry, but also be able to ask questions about the coach. Now, there's always going to be good things and bad things about anyone who does their job or anyone who does, or like your game as a player. But it is important to find a coach that you're going to be able to click with. You will definitely not agree with them at times, which thing to go through anyways. It is nice, really. Did I freeze?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Oh man, you guys, I'm so sorry.
That's okay. It's all good.
Was it frozen for a while?
Just a little bit there.
Okay. I'll back up just a little bit then and make it short. Basically, the coach that you click with the most is going to be probably the most helpful, but everybody is different, and it's really just about finding that chemistry that works for you and your coach. All right. And then one thing to end on is to stay excited about your game. You know, there's going to be a lot of new things in college, and there's going to be a lot of adversity that you're not used to. And being able to focus on the good things and learn from the bad things is really important, kind of like the grit that Keri was talking about. Everything is going to be really different. And as long as you can stay excited about your golf game and stay excited about your teammates and enjoy the experience, it's going to be a great one, because it's really easy to get caught up in the stresses of this new life. But it's really awesome if you can at least get through the, few tough weeks of exams or, difficult tournaments. So yeah, those are kind of the main points I wanted to talk about. I did realize I skipped my intro, so sorry about that.
That's all good, Anna. Thank you so much. There is a couple coaches on and a couple parents. So we got a smaller group here. So if you'd like Rob or Jason or Dwayne or Scott or Nick for that matter, please unmute yourself and fire away some questions if you have. If we don't have any questions, we can also email any of the coaches on the call tonight. So.
Hey, Steve, it's Rob here. Can you hear me okay? Perfect. Yeah, thanks a lot, Steve. Thanks, ladies. Yeah, a ton of information on there. I'll just give you a bit of background of where we're at. My daughter, Ella's a player. She's, in grade 10 right now. And has had some success at provincial level and some of the national level. She's currently down in Florida training for a couple months. We've been able to do that the last couple of years. And I just have a ton of questions here. I think I've narrowed it down because she's in grade 10. So we know that June 15th date is coming, and kind of then hopefully the fun starts. I was fortunate enough to get a hockey scholarship at Ferris State University. So I am familiar with the lifestyle, but this golf recruiting thing completely has me puzzled, because it's so vast that's just really hard to know where to begin, because hockey is the opposite. As the coach, they just recruit for you, and all of a sudden, you get a call and you get a letter and you're signed. So, Anna, I really appreciate your comments about geography and culture, religion and climate, because that's what we've been thinking about and talking about with my daughter. And I didn't know if those things should be relevant or not, but I think they are, because like you're right, like flying to Michigan to where I went it was a small town and it was hard to get there. And I just am kind of thinking about those things right now. But anyway, my first question right now, what I'm struggling with, her being in grade 10, and I do watch, and actually there was just a big college tournament where she trains at Eagle Creek there in Orlando. You're probably familiar with it, Anna, but so she was able to watch the girls there, which was super helpful for her. But anyway, she's in grade 10, and the score she's shooting now is, how do they project in 2 years? So I don't know where we should be targeting, like top 50 Division I, bottom 50 Division I. Like, I don't know how coaches will look at her projection from where she's shooting, what she is in grade 10 and her ability, opposed to what that might be in grade 12, and kind of where we should be targeting. So maybe Claire, somebody wants to help me out there.
Sure. So I think one really helpful tool for you right now is to look at the junior golf scoreboard. Like, I assume if your daughter's in Florida and she's playing, she's probably ranked on there. And so what you can do is look up what her ranking is in her graduating class. And then, because that's a class-based ranking, you can see what other kids who are ranked similarly in their graduating classes have done in terms of their college options by looking at their list of signees. But I would say, kind of, when it comes to the recruiting process, if you want to get a sense of, it's total ballpark, because as you heard, like from Keri, it's so much more than just what is somebody shooting. But if you want to get a ballpark sense of it, I would say, you know, in the next summer and the summer after 11th grade, depending on the timing of your daughter's process, you're comparing her scores to the 5 player initially, and then the 3 player after that. And if she's shooting scores that are roughly in line with a 3 player on a college golf team, you know, it doesn't have to be like a strict average. You can throw out some of the outliers, because I do think that at this stage, it's more about potential than consistency. Like Keri was right, it's absolutely about consistency later on. But I think initially, like, you want to get a sense of where she's trending. And if she's shooting scores that are kind of in line with like the number 3 player on a college golf team, she's recruitable there. Right now, it's probably more like the 5 player, but I think next summer, the 3 player.
Thanks. That's great advice, because yes, I do look at the golf stat website, and I love following the tournaments and seeing, yes, where the kids are. And I think the important part for me is the yardage, like, because right now, you know, she plays Hurricane Junior and she's playing at 5,600 yards, but I mean, she needs to be at that 62, 6,300, right? Like,
yeah. So I'd say you can work up to that. And again, I want to hear other people's opinions on this, but my perspective is like, you want to work up to that, and you play in some tournaments that are like stretch type tournaments where it is a little bit longer, and she's going to be a little bit out of her comfort zone. And that's a good thing, because that's how you gain experience. And, you know, learning often doesn't happen in a comfortable setting. You learn a lot better when you're a little out of your comfort zone. But then I often think that like it's really good to pair that with the 5,600 yard courses and the local events where you feel really comfortable and confident, because the mental side is huge. And like getting comfortable shooting, I mean, whatever the benchmark is, breaking 80, breaking 75, breaking par, like you're going to do that. Your daughter's going to do that more often on a shorter course, but she can take that feeling and that experience with her when she starts playing longer courses. So she's going to be like, oh, I just made the turn in 36. I've never been here before because it's a longer course, but I have been here where I've made the turn at even. And I know that I have like the mental toughness to continue through. So my philosophy is really that like you want to get some of both as you're moving through junior golf, because it's a dynamic that I hate, but it's a reality, which is we start to like care more about results as we get closer to the recruiting process. And results matter. That's why we play, but you're also still just focusing on getting better. And the more you can focus on just getting better, the more you're going to like what happens to your scores anyway. And so I think if you almost try to forget about the recruiting process for a little bit and like, make sure you're doing the right things, but like focus on that learning journey, the more you're going to like where you go. Someone else weigh in.
To add on that, when I was a junior golfer, I played a lot of the women's events. So I think the first time I played the Saskatchewan Women's Amateur was, I think I was 14. And being able to play against people that were a lot older than me was intimidating, but it definitely bumped me up to the next level. And that's something that also helped me when I was in college. I would play some professional events as well when I was living in Florida. So being able to, if you're able to, jump to the next step for a couple events and see how it feels, and, mix those into your schedule, kind of like Keri said, because you're not going to find a lot of junior events for girls that are, over 5,800. You might maybe in some of the states where the ball flies further, but for the most part, being able to jump up a step and then come back to your comfort level, and then jump up a step and come back to your comfort level is exactly the way to do it. And then on one of the first things I wanted to comment on, when you said that she went down to Florida, it's awesome that she's playing events down there. And I forgot to mention that earlier. As a Canadian, to be able to get your name out there, if you want to play college golf in the States, it is important to be able to play a few events in the States. Like I said, to the girls earlier when I was introducing myself, it's harder for Canadians, I think, sometimes to get noticed in America if you're not like the very top person in your province. And even Saskatchewan, specifically, a lot of college coaches, in my experience, had never really looked at anyone in Saskatchewan because there weren't that many golfers here. So if she's able to play a few events in the States, you know, every year, like 1 or 2, if you guys are down there for vacation or something, that really does help college coaches to understand, okay, she plays golf here in Canada where the conditions are like this, and she can also play golf in the States where the conditions are like this. And then they have numbers that they can compare to the kids that they're already possibly looking at that are in the area.
Yeah, and I agree with you, because you know everything's different, right? You're at sea level, the grass is different, everything's different. It's just a different feel down there, and it just takes a while to get used to. I mean, Canadian Nationals last year, yeah, she shot, you know, 4 rounds under 80 from 6,300 yards. So I know she can do it, and it's just a matter of getting, you know, more consistent. And I know she has a couple more years to do that. So the one question I had for whoever is I guess sitting on the bench, and you know, if you are recruited, and maybe because your intangibles are so good, like the coach talked about, but maybe your scoring isn't quite there yet. Like, is it demoralizing to sit on the bench for a year, knowing you got to get better, but you're at a top 50 school, or you know, is it better to step in as number 1, number 2, or number 3? You know, where maybe you're at a lower ranked school, kind of stuff. So if anybody can talk about maybe sitting on the bench for a year or 2 before you really get into the action.
I would probably say that depends on Ella's personality. You know, like kind of something I touched on, I might have cut out at the time, but understanding that if she excels as someone who is one of the top leaders of a team, then I would look at schools and favor schools where she would be one of the better players and be a leader on the team, because that's also a super great way to be motivated. There's a lot of people that are comfortable constantly working and having someone to lead the team and being able to have someone to compete against at all times. I was one of those people. I wanted competition. I needed someone to be better than me because I wanted to beat them. But, you know, there are also players too who may benefit from having that extra motivation of not playing every tournament. And their goal could be to play every tournament. But I do think that it's harder to do that. Someone who doesn't play all the time, in my opinion, and this is strictly opinion because everyone's different, it's harder to watch your team go to events when you're not playing because you want to be there. So my thoughts would be, you definitely want to find a school that she's going to be like a number 4 or number 3 player if she's motivated by other players to get better. Or, you know, she could be number 1 or number 2 and lead the team if that's what motivates her. But it's really about what motivates her as a person and a player. That is going to, that will be your answer, whatever answers those questions.
If I can chime in and add to that, I think you're spot on, Anna, that like everybody's different. And I think that's something that, you know, you try to get a sense of. Like, it's hard when you're 15 because sometimes you don't know. But I do think that it's like, what's the environment that's going to help you the best, to the extent that you can predict that. And then, you know, as part of it, I will say, like, the advice I always give is like, you're trying to get recruited because you want to play golf in college. You don't just want to be on a college golf team. And like, it happened to me a couple times, and it's like gut wrenching when you watch the team leave without you. And so I think like you want to be definitely top 5. And from a recruiting perspective, like that's who the coach, from a performance perspective, that's who the coach wants to bring in, right? Somebody who's going to be an impact player on the team. And so I think, you know, when you combine all of that, I'd say, yeah, like the situation definitely matters. And the cultural pieces, like nobody plays great golf when they're unhappy or they're struggling in their classes. Like it just doesn't, it's not a recipe for success, like Keri talked about. So I think when you add all of that up, like the places that you find, you know, as a family are right for your daughter, like the best way to know it is when you get on campus. Like you're gonna do a lot of recruiting, and you're gonna communicate with the coach and make sure that like the X's and O's and that, you know, you check all the boxes. But like then when you get on campus, you're really gonna get a sense of whether that's the place that you can play and be successful. And that's gonna give you the experience that you really want, whatever that experience is. And that's why I think I'm a big believer, like it's crazy to start the process so early, but it's through that communication that you really get a sense of like who these people are that you're talking about joining on a team. And the end of the day, like it is an experience, and you want that to be, like Anna said, the best it possibly can. And so
And that's the point, because that's when you walk in and you're on the 5th line in a hockey team, it's not fun.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
sucks. And no matter if you're highly recruited or you're not, or not maybe highly recruited, it still sucks you're not playing.
Yeah.
Still sucks.
I think people can get a little caught up in like the bumper sticker approach to college. And it's like, you have to live this experience, and you want to make sure that it's something that on a day-to-day basis you're going to enjoy. And it's not just about, you know, the golf bag that you're carrying around and what it says. So I think, you know,
That's a really great point. I agree. People get way too caught up in, oh yeah, I go to this school, and you know, it sounds great, but it's like, do you really love where you are? Because it's not about the school, it's about you having the experience.